I mean, Crestron's trying to get everywhere at the moment, isn't it? On the network, via the cloud, and so on. Is that the way AV's going to go?
It really, I mean, it's more change than ever. And so I've been at Crestron for 13 years, and we led that whole analog to digital transition, which was probably one of the bigger transitions we've had. And this sort of digital to the network transition is going to be infinitely bigger because it dramatically changes what you can do. Whereas like the analog to digital technology transition, okay, it's one kind of wire, now it's a different kind of wire. You've got to learn all the knowledge about how the wire works. Now you go to things like AV over IP, you can get content anywhere, which is almost more of it's like a system designer's dream, but now you've got to actually figure it out what you really want. And so you've got these two technologies that I would say are changing the industry the most. The first is the AV over IP, because we've had audio over IP for quite a while. We used it, but once you still had to have like regular non-IP video, that sort of constrained what you could do. Now that you've got full AV over IP, I mean, everything is on the network, which means you better become a network expert, really, to be in this industry, certainly 5 years from now. The other piece is all of these new services, these cloud services and these unified communication services. There's a lot more software, a lot more application-based stuff that we really have to know. So that's also IP, but it generally is sort of a little bit different because they tie into all these different backends. AV over IP, you've got to know more of the bits and bytes, but when you tie into Microsoft Teams or Zoom, it's not about the packet, it's about what does this application do, how does it tie into all the other things. I think there's a lot of shift going on there, where we've just got to get a lot more knowledge about it.
How do you refine your thought with product development when the market is moving so quickly and you're having to think so early about your development plans?
Well, so I work in the R&D team, right? We really run the R&D division, and we're looking out in generally two areas. We're looking out in the market, the shifts that are happening in the market and what the customer demand is. And then we also luckily we're looking at technology. And we're lucky to be the size that we are, that we're working with companies like Intel and Microsoft as peers in these spaces, not as one company saying, here, little company, here's something you can use. We're actually developing these roadmaps with those large technology providers, which is an incredible place to be, and it gives you that visibility because when we make a product, it could take up to 3 years to make before you start shipping it, which means we've got to be thinking about things 5 years from now or even further, right? And that's really our job, is to think out that far. And so you can see some of these general trends from a customer demand standpoint and from a technology standpoint. The biggest technology trend is probably this shift to everything IP, because at that point, it's infinitely flexible and your applications can change very quickly. You can start doing one thing one day and another thing the next day. And customers have even really picked up on that, where they go, I can buy these set-top boxes today, and I may not know what my customers as employees of this organization are going to want 2 years from now. But if it's AV over IP based, guess what? I'm flexible. I can change it. I don't even have to buy new stuff. And so we see that from the technology side, from the customer demand standpoint. I think it's really this growth in unified communications and collaboration applications that is they're going to be pervasive. If you look at, the way we did conference calls even 5 years ago, you had the whole ding, who is it? You had to go through all of this rigmarole, and a conference call was a big deal. It was a lot to get set up. You had to really listen in and pay attention. In the modern time, jump on a Microsoft Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting. It's absolutely seamless. You see everybody who's there. Everybody can present. You can record it. And so the power of these unified communications tools is, I think, driving a lot of the demand for the systems that we put in. I think the days are gone when people are just putting in audio conferencing only systems, right? Everybody wants video effectively everywhere. And so those are the general trends that we see, and of course you build out your products based on seeing where those trends are going.
AV is getting away from a proprietary area now, isn't it? It's becoming quite diluted.
Yes, absolutely. We've had to change. It's funny because I think historically people had looked at Crestron as proprietary for a number of reasons. But the reality is, internally, we're incredibly open. We give you all these tools. You can use C# to program our stuff. You can write interfaces in HTML5. Our panels can run all these apps from partners. And so we've made this really, let's say, significant pivot towards using all these open standards. So now you can do what you want. And this is important because, we're competing with consumer level technologies, right? Before we started doing our scheduling panel thing, which is probably the best example of where these more modern partnerships are going, a lot of customers were just putting, consumer tablets outside a conference room because it ran the business application that they needed. They go, why do I want to buy this AV thing that only does one thing? Well, once we started opening up our partnership platform, we're able to provide them with the business applications that they need, but more importantly, the value that Crestron brings is we bring a managed, very enterprise-grade, deployable device, as opposed to something like a consumer tablet, right? Whenever there's a consumer version of something, there's always a fear that the consumer version is just going to take over everything that we do, but the reality is, the consumer version is good for consumers. Businesses want more. They want more security, they want more manageability, and they want, I would say, simplicity, but simplicity for the support person as well. Whereas a homeowner is probably willing to deal with a little bit of extra hassle. When you have 1,000 of something, you can't be dealing with a little bit of hassle. And so Crestron has really pivoted to this area where we're providing enterprise-grade devices that are running all of these partner applications. So let's think outside the box about what AV systems can do.
AV functionality on a network is going to become quite ubiquitous, isn't it? How are companies going to be able to differentiate themselves? How are they going to guard their USPs?
There's going to be a lot of innovation around support and management tools and deployment tools, because there's a real cost to an organization. Every extra 5, 10, 15 minutes that it takes for you to deploy something and continue supporting it, those are not cheap salaries that add up very, very quickly. So a lot of the innovation we're doing and differentiation that we're doing is around being these really, really robust set of tools that make it simple to use these devices anywhere. And probably one of the best examples of it is something we just launched here at this show, where we have remote control of all of our touchscreens. And what it does is it literally mirrors the screen of the touchscreen through our management tool, XIO Cloud, so a support person can literally feel like they're sitting in front of that touchscreen wherever it may be, which allows a support person in Chicago to support deployments in Malaysia as if they were standing right there. And that's a big difference, because a lot of support today still ends up with somebody effectively running over to the room to have to go check things out.
I mean, looking at management of technology, people want to really manage different types of product from different manufacturers. Is that going to be realistic?
And so we've started doing a lot of this development with Crestron products first, because of course we had to build the technology. We've got a lot of hooks and APIs and SDKs now that we're doing to go to all third-party devices, right? Again, this is part of that open strategy, right? We're not proprietary. So XIO Cloud's a great example. It's our management tool, does Crestron devices today. What we've already released is an SDK, so other manufacturers will look like native devices within this management platform. We released an API, so other cloud services can pull information out of the cloud service. And we're releasing third-party driver integration, so we can hook in all these other things. Now, we're making all these investments because I agree with you. Nobody wants to be, locked in or beholden to even a company like Crestron. Yeah, and we're becoming, I think Amazon was the one who coined the term, but a service-based organization where all of our internal teams have APIs to all the other services, and at any point we can expose those APIs to third parties. Whether it's a customer who just wants to do more with, do something beyond what we've provided, or whether it's a partner who wants to integrate with our systems. The idea of just having these API hooks everywhere, so again, you can plug in any piece you want to replace, is important. And it's a big deal, because when you just had a couple rooms, the integration was never really worth it, because you were only ever able to scale that to a couple rooms. There wasn't a lot of payback. But the second you have hundreds of rooms for something, building in these integrations, it becomes a much bigger deal.
Where are the next areas of development going to come from with AV?
I think analytics is going to play a very big role in what we do, because when you look, we actually do this in a presentation for some of our customers. When you look at the cost of the technology in a room, you could debate it and say this is a $5,000 room or a $10,000 room or maybe more. But look at what the real estate cost is of that room, right? Technology is just one component of it. If you take a look at the average size of a conference room in Manhattan, that's $15,000 in rent every single year. And when you talk to organizations, they have no idea what's happening in these rooms. The most advanced state-of-the-art thing that they do today is something called a bed check, which means somebody walks around with a clipboard every once in a while and just sees how many people are in the room. They do a study for a few weeks, they say here's what it is, and then they don't do that study for another 5-10 years. Meanwhile, a million things have changed since then. So this idea of really getting better analytics around what your investments are doing is going to be key. And there's a really interesting example of that, or a parallel in a different industry. Spotify recently, talked about how, they're allowing people to, stream music and do all these things, but now they're actually selling the data about what people are listening to and their moods to advertising companies so they can better target you, which is crazy and a little bit creepy to think about it in a personal sense. Whereas in an enterprise sense, we're not selling it to advertisers, but we're providing it back to the organization so they have a better understanding about what they're doing.
Is AV on a network going to be truly interoperable?
It's tough to say because, is there interoperability on the web? YouTube streams within YouTube, but they build in hooks so other pages can connect back to things like YouTube. So at the stream level, there's not interoperability, but to the user, you have a good level of interoperability between these services. HD-based was certainly the promise of interoperability, and we probably sell, in fact I know we sell more HD-based products than anybody else. There wasn't a whole lot of interoperability, but there's a key distinction to be made there because nobody really wanted to plug a Crestron transmitter into some other AV manufacturer's receiver, because we also make receivers. There's no real advantage to connecting like for like things. The real interoperability of HD-based that had value and we saw happen over and over again was when projector manufacturers and display manufacturers embedded HD-based in those devices, because now I could gain some efficiencies and I was connecting something else from same industry but a different product category into these systems. We see the similar thing happening in AV over IP, whereas it doesn't really matter if you can plug different people's transmitters and receivers into one another because there's no added value. The second you start bringing in these other things like displays, if you start bringing AV over IP into the software world, right, onto PCs and other things, that there is real value in. And I can tell you we're working on some things now where you're going to see some really cool interoperability.
What new tech is lighting your fire at the moment?
It really is that software side of things, right? Connecting into all these other spaces and all these ecosystems. We had scheduling panels for a decade now, right? And it's funny when you talk to some of our sales guys, they were like, yeah, it's an okay market, it's going, but it's about where it's going to be. The second we tapped into all these partners, all of a sudden they were like, oh my God, there's all this demand out there that I had no idea about. There's a huge market, and it really goes to show once you build in these technical hooks so people can do more, there's a huge, huge world out there. I mean, look at the size of the IT industry. I think it's something like $3.2 billion compared to $3.2 trillion compared to the 100 and something million dollar AV industry. And it's not a radically different thing. We talk about it like it's two different industries. We're effectively just sort of one subset, one category of the IT industry. There's all these other places we can take this technology. I'm really excited for where it's going to go and the amount of growth it's going to provide.